Gang leader put $500,000 bounty on single dad veteran, but within 72 hours, the city watched in shock as the gang dropped to their knees, begging for forgiveness. Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. The factory's night shift had been long and grueling. Jake Turner's shoulders ached as he pulled his worn pickup truck onto the quiet city streets. The dashboard clock read 5:47 a.m., and his thoughts drifted to Lily, probably still curled up in her bed with her favorite stuffed elephant. A small smile touched his tired face as he imagined making her favorite breakfast chocolate chip pancakes shaped like hearts. The streets were mostly empty at this hour, lit only by occasional street lamps that cast pools of yellow light on the cracked pavement. Jake adjusted the radio, keeping the volume low as soft gospel music filled the cab. The familiar melodies reminded him of Sunday mornings with Sarah before the cancer took her. Those memories didn't sting as much anymore, but they still left a hollow feeling in his chest. A flash of movement caught his eye as he passed a narrow alley between two brick buildings. Jake's military training kicked in before his conscious mind could process what he was seeing. Multiple figures, the distinct sound of flesh meeting flesh, and a young voice crying out in pain. Jake's hands tightened on the steering wheel. Every instinct screamed at him to keep driving, to get home to Lily. But that cry, it could have been someone's son, someone's brother. "Lord, give me strength," he whispered, pulling his truck to the curb. The scene in the alley was worse than he'd first glimpsed. 4 men surrounded a teenage boy, taking turns, landing kicks to his ribs as he tried to curl into a protective ball. The boy's face was already bloody, his school backpack torn open with books scattered across the dirty pavement. Jake moved silently, thanking God for the training that still felt like second nature after all these years. He was bigger than most of the attackers, his frame solid from years of factory work and keeping up his military exercises. The first man didn't even know Jake was there until a firm hand clamped down on his shoulder, spinning him around into a precise strike that dropped him to the ground. The others turned, startled by the sudden intervention. Jake didn't give them time to think. He drove his elbow into the second attacker's solar plexus, then used the man's momentum to throw him into his companions. The move created enough chaos and space for Jake to reach the fallen teenager. "Can you walk?" Jake asked, his voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through his veins. The boy nodded weakly, blood trickling from his split lip. Jake helped him to his feet, keeping his body between the teenager and the attackers who were now regrouping, anger replacing their initial surprise. "You don't want this fight," Jake warned them, his voice carrying the quiet authority that had once commanded troops in Baghdad. "Police are probably already on their way. Walk away now." One of the men pulled something from his waistband. The metallic glint of a knife caught the dim light. Jake's mind flashed to Lily, to her sweet face and the way she needed him to come home. But he couldn't leave this kid to die in an alley. Jake backed up slowly, supporting the injured teenager while keeping his eyes on the threats in front of him. The boy stumbled, nearly falling, and Jake tightened his grip around his waist. "I've got you, son. Just keep moving." They were almost to the alley's entrance when one of the attackers lunged forward. Jake turned sharply, pushing the teenager behind him while deflecting the knife with a move that had been drilled into him countless times. The blade sliced through his jacket sleeve but missed flesh. Jake's counterstrike was automatic, a short, brutal combination that sent the knife clattering across the pavement and its wielder sprawling. The other attackers hesitated, clearly realizing this wasn't the easy prey they'd expected. Jake used that moment of uncertainty to guide the teenager the final few steps to the relative safety of the street. His truck was right there, its door still open with gospel music floating softly into the night. Jake's hands were steady as he pulled out his phone and dialed 911. "I need police and an ambulance at the corner of Mason and 4th, he reported, his voice clear and professional. "Assault victim, multiple perpetrators, at least one armed with a knife." He could hear sirens in the distance, growing closer. The teenager sagged against him, trembling now that the immediate danger had passed. Jake noticed he was younger than he'd first thought, probably no more than 15 or 16. There was something familiar about his features, but Jake couldn't place it. "What's your name?" Jake asked softly, trying to keep the boy conscious and focused. "Marcus," the teenager managed through chattering teeth. Shock was setting in. Jake shrugged off his jacket and wrapped it around the boy's shoulders. "I'm Jake. You're safe now, Marcus. Help is coming." The sirens were very close now, their wailing bouncing off the buildings. The gang members had melted away into the shadows, leaving behind only scattered evidence of their violence: the dropped knife, Marcus's torn backpack, spots of blood on the pavement. Marcus suddenly clutched Jake's arm, his fingers digging in with surprising strength. His eyes were wide with a fear that seemed to go beyond his immediate injuries. "Thank you," he whispered, the words shaky and weighted with something Jake didn't yet understand. Jake looked down at the grateful face that was already beginning to swell from its bruises, and a chill ran down his spine. There was definitely something familiar about those features, something that tugged at his memory of faces he'd seen in local news reports. But before he could piece it together, red and blue lights flooded the street, and the night, morning sunlight streamed through the kitchen windows as Jake flipped another heart-shaped pancake on the griddle. The rich aroma of chocolate chips melting into warm batter filled their small home. Despite his exhaustion from the previous night's events, he'd managed a few hours of sleep before getting up to make Lily's favorite breakfast. "Daddy, you made them perfect." Lily bounced in her chair, her dark curls swaying with each movement. She was already dressed for school in her favorite blue jumper, white socks pulled up neat and tidy. Jake smiled, sliding 2 more pancakes onto her plate. "Only the best for my girl." He watched as she drizzled maple syrup in careful circles, just like her mother used to do. The memory made his chest tighten, but he pushed it aside, focusing instead on Lily's happy face. "Did you have a good night at work?" she asked between bites. Jake hesitated, his hand pausing as he reached for the coffee pot. The image of the beaten teenager flashed through his mind, along with the glint of the knife that had nearly caught him. "It was eventful," he said carefully. "But everything turned out okay." A sudden pounding at their front door made them both jump. Jake's military instincts kicked in immediately as he moved toward the entrance, gesturing for Lily to stay in her seat. Jake, open up." The voice belonged to Mr. Martinez, their elderly neighbor who had lived next door for the past 20 years. Jake opened the door to find the usually calm man visibly shaken, his weather-worn face pale with worry.
"Henry, what's wrong?"
Mr. Martinez grabbed Jake's arm, pulling him onto the small front porch. "You need to hear this," he said, his voice dropping to an urgent whisper. "Word's all over the neighborhood. That boy you saved last night? He was Darnell Cruz's little brother." Jake's stomach dropped. Everyone knew Darnell Cruz, the feared leader of the East Side Kings. His gang controlled half the city's drug trade and had been responsible for 3 shootings in the past year alone. "Cruz put a bounty on your head," Mr. Martinez continued, his grip tightening on Jake's arm. $500,000, Jake. Every thug and desperate person in the city will be looking for you. The world seemed to tilt slightly as Jake processed this information. His first thought wasn't for himself, but for Lily, still sitting innocently at their kitchen table, probably wondering why her breakfast had been interrupted. "Are you sure about this?" Jake asked, though he could see the truth in his neighbor's frightened eyes. "My nephew works at the corner store where Cruz's guys hang out. He heard it straight from them this morning. Cruz is furious about what happened to Marcus." Jake ran a hand over his face, feeling the rough stubble beneath his palm. "I need to get Lily to school," he said, his mind already racing through options and contingencies. "You can't just go about your normal routine," Mr. Martinez protested. "These people are serious." "I know they are." Jake's voice was steady, even as his heart hammered in his chest. "But I also know that changing our patterns is the first sign of fear, and fear is what they want." Back inside, Jake found Lily standing in the hallway, her small face pinched with concern. "Daddy, is everything okay?" He knelt down to her level, tucking a stray curl behind her ear. "Remember how we talked about there being bad people in the world sometimes?" She nodded solemnly. "Well, Daddy helped someone last night who needed help, but now some bad people are angry about it." "Are they going to hurt you?" Her lower lip trembled slightly. Jake pulled her into a tight hug, breathing in the sweet scent of her strawberry shampoo. "I promise you'll be safe, sweetheart. That's my job as your daddy, and I take it very seriously." After dropping Lily off at school, with explicit instructions to her teacher about only releasing her to him or the 2 trusted neighbors on her emergency contact list, Jake drove straight to the police station. The familiar brick building looked solid and reassuring, but Jake knew better than to expect too much. Officer Sarah Chen, whom he knew from church, met him in the lobby. Her usually cheerful face was grim as she led him to a private room. "We've heard about the bounty," she said without preamble. "And yes, we're taking it seriously. But Jake, She sighed heavily. We don't have the resources for round-the-clock protection. The best we can do is increase patrols in your neighborhood. Jake nodded, having expected as much. I understand. I mainly wanted to make sure you were aware, and to ask about protection for Lily's school. They spent the next hour discussing security measures, but Jake could see the concern in Officer Chen's eyes. She knew, as he did, that a determined gang with resources could find ways around any standard police protection. The day passed in a blur of preparations. Jake called his supervisor at the factory to explain the situation and request a temporary leave of absence. He checked and rechecked the security systems he'd installed after Sarah's death, adding a few new measures he'd learned in the military. His phone buzzed constantly with messages from concerned friends and neighbors, each one bringing new reports of the bounty's reach. As evening settled over the city, Jake stood at his living room window, watching the street while Lily did her homework at the kitchen table. The familiar routine of multiplication tables and spelling words felt surreal against the weight of their new reality. Movement caught his eye. A dark sedan with tinted windows, idling at the corner. It had been there for at least 20 minutes, just sitting with its engine running. Jake's hand instinctively moved to the small of his back, where his licensed, concealed weapon rested in its holster. Lily, he called softly, not taking his eyes off the car. Time to get ready for bed, sweetheart. He heard her gathering her books, the innocent sounds of her routine continuing while he mentally cataloged every detail of the suspicious vehicle. Jake moved through the house, methodically checking each lock twice. The deadbolts were solid, the windows secured, but he knew from experience that determined enemies could find ways around any barrier. The car remained there, a dark presence in the gathering dusk, as Jake pulled the curtains closed and led Lily upstairs for her bedtime routine. His mind was already working through contingency plans, weighing options and calculating risks. But his voice remained steady as he read Lily her bedtime story, knowing that his calm was her anchor in this storm. The first rays of dawn were just breaking through Jake's bedroom window when sharp knocks echoed through the house. He jolted awake, his heart racing as he grabbed the baseball bat beside his bed. After yesterday's news about the bounty, every sound set him on edge. More knocks, but these had a pattern 3 quick. 2 slow. Jake recognized it instantly. It was the same signal his unit had used in Iraq. He crept to the window and peered out. His tension melted into disbelief. Standing on his front lawn was a group of familiar faces, at least 15 people. Right in front was Mike Chen, his old squad leader, along with Sarah Rodriguez and Tom Wilson, veterans he'd served with. Behind them stood Pastor Roberts from the local church and several congregation members. Jake hurried downstairs, checking on Lily, who was still asleep in her room, before opening the front door. "Morning, soldier," Mike said with a grim smile. His salt and pepper hair was cut in the same military style he'd worn for 20 years. "Heard you could use some backup." "What are you all doing here?" Jake asked, his voice rough with emotion. Sarah stepped forward, her service medals glinting on her jacket. "You really think we'd let you face this alone? We're your unit, Jake. Always will be." Pastor Roberts, a tall man with kind eyes, moved to the front. "And you're part of our church family, Jake. We protect our own." Jake's throat tightened as he looked at the gathered faces. Some he knew from Sunday services, others from veteran support meetings. All wore expressions of fierce determination. "We've got it figured out," Tom explained, pulling out a detailed map of the neighborhood. 3 shifts, round-the-clock surveillance. The vets handle security, church volunteers manage supplies and coordination. Mrs. Peterson, a grandmother of 5 who made the best casseroles at church potlucks, held up several plastic containers. "First shift brings breakfast. Can't fight on an empty stomach." Jake wanted to protest, to tell them they shouldn't risk themselves. But he knew that look in their eyes. It was the same one he'd seen in Iraq, the unwavering loyalty of people who'd stand together no matter what. Inside, tiny footsteps padded down the stairs. "Daddy?" Lily appeared, rubbing sleep from her eyes. "Why are there so many people outside?" Jake lifted her into his arms. "These are our friends, sweetheart. They've come to help us." Throughout the morning, more people arrived. Women from the church filled Jake's kitchen with homemade meals. Veterans set up observation points and communication systems. The Martinez kids from next door showed up with colorful posters they'd made, covered in hearts and written in crayon. "We love Mr. Jake," and "Our hero." By afternoon, Jake's house had become a command center of sorts. Veterans in civilian clothes patrolled the streets, looking like ordinary neighbors out for a walk. Church members organized a phone tree system to report suspicious activity. Even Mr. Garcia, who owned the local hardware store, installed security cameras free of charge. "Remember that time in Fallujah?" Mike asked as they reviewed security plans at Jake's kitchen table. "When we were pinned down for 3 days?" Jake nodded, remembering the fierce firefight and how their unit had stuck together, watching each other's backs until help arrived. "This isn't so different," Mike continued. "Except this time, we've got better food." He gestured to the stack of casseroles and pies filling the counter. Lily spent the afternoon making thank you cards for everyone, her small hands carefully drawing pictures of smiling faces and hearts. The sight of her, safe and happy among their protectors, made Jake's chest ache with gratitude. As evening approached, Pastor Roberts suggested they all share dinner together. They pushed Jake's furniture against the walls, set up folding tables, and created an impromptu dining room. The smell of Mrs. Peterson's famous lasagna filled the house as 20 people squeezed in, passing plates and sharing stories. Lily sat between Jake and Sarah, giggling as the veteran taught her their old unit's secret handshake. The atmosphere was warm, almost festive, despite the serious circumstances that had brought them together. Jake looked around at these people who dropped everything to stand with him and his daughter. For the first time since hearing about the bounty, he felt something like hope warming his chest. They weren't just friends or fellow church members anymore, they were family. The peaceful moment shattered as something crashed through the front window. Glass sprayed across the floor as people ducked for cover. Veterans immediately moved to secure the room, while church members gathered around Lily, shielding her. In the center of the broken glass lay a brick with a note wrapped around it. Jake picked it up with trembling fingers and read the message. "You can't hide." The morning sun filtered through Lily's pink curtains, casting a warm glow across her room. Jake found her sitting cross-legged on her bed, still in her pajamas, turning the brick from last night over and over in her small hands. Her face was pale, and her lower lip trembled. "Hey, sweetie," Jake said softly, sitting beside her. The mattress dipped under his weight. "You shouldn't be touching that. They want to hurt you, don't they, Daddy?" Lily's voice was barely a whisper. Her fingers traced the rough edges of the brick, where it had crashed through their front window the night before. Jake gently took the brick from her hands and set it aside. He pulled her into a tight hug, breathing in the familiar scent of her strawberry shampoo. "I won't let anything happen to us, Lily. Remember what Mom used to say about being brave? That being brave doesn't mean you're not scared," Lily recited, snuggling closer. "It means doing the right thing even when you are scared." "That's right." Jake kissed the top of her head. "Now, let's get ready for school." While Lily got dressed, Jake heard familiar voices outside. Mike and Sarah from his old unit were already there, along with Tom and a couple other veterans. They'd established a protective routine, just like old times. "Morning, Princess," Sarah called out as Jake and Lily emerged from the house. She wore her favorite leather jacket, the one with her service patches. "Ready for school?" Lily managed a small smile, clutching her backpack. "Hi, Miss Sarah." The veterans formed a loose circle around them as they walked. To anyone else, it might have looked like friends taking a morning stroll, but Jake recognized their tactical formation. Mike took point, while Tom and the others scanned side streets and alleyways. "Did you finish that science project, Lily?" Sarah asked, keeping the conversation light as they walked. "The one with the solar system?" "Yes. I made Jupiter extra big, with all its moons." Some of the tension left Lily's shoulders as she chatted about her project. The walk to school was uneventful, but Jake's trained eye caught every detail. The usual morning traffic, parents dropping off their kids, the crossing guard at her post. Everything seemed normal, yet his instincts stayed sharp. At the school gates, Jake knelt to hug Lily goodbye. "Have a great day, sweetheart. Mrs. Martinez will pick you up after school, okay?" "Can't you come get me?" Lily's fingers tightened on his shirt. "I'll be right there with Mrs. Martinez," Jake promised. "Just like we planned." The school day passed slowly. Jake kept busy helping his veteran friends organize neighborhood patrols, but his mind never strayed far from Lily. When the final bell rang, he was already waiting with Mrs. Martinez outside the school. That's when he saw them. 3 teenage boys lounging against the chain-link fence. They wore the red bandanas that marked them as part of Darnell's gang. Their eyes followed Lily as she walked down the steps with her classmates. Jake's muscles tensed, but he forced himself to move slowly, deliberately. He'd faced worse in Iraq. These were just kids trying to look tough. "Lily!" he called out, his voice carrying across the playground. "Over here, sweetheart." The boys straightened as Jake approached. He drew himself to his full height, shoulders back, chin up, the stance that had commanded respect from his troops overseas. His eyes met each of theirs in turn, unwavering. "Is there something you need?" he asked quietly, but with steel in his voice. The youngest of them shifted uncomfortably. None of them spoke. A black SUV with tinted windows rolled past slowly. The window lowered just enough for Jake to see Darnell Cruz's face, his expression hard and cold. Their eyes locked for a moment before the SUV accelerated away. The boys melted back into the crowd of departing students. Jake felt Lily's small hand slip into his, trembling slightly. "Let's go home, Daddy," she whispered. That evening, after a quiet dinner, Jake tucked Lily into bed. Her room was bathed in the soft glow of her butterfly nightlight, but shadows still lurked in the corners. "Can we pray extra tonight?" Lily asked, pulling her blanket up to her chin. Jake knelt beside her bed, just as he had done every night since losing his wife. "Of course we can." Lily closed her eyes, her hands clasped together. "Dear God, please keep Daddy safe, and me too, and all our friends who are helping us." Jake's throat tightened as he listened to her simple, earnest prayer. His own prayer was silent but fierce, for strength, for wisdom, for protection. "And please help the bad men learn to be good," Lily added softly, "like you helped Tommy Wilson stop being a bully in 2nd grade. Despite everything, Jake felt a smile tug at his lips. His daughter's faith was pure and unwavering, seeing hope where adults saw only danger. "Amen," he whispered, smoothing her hair back from her forehead. "Daddy?" Lily's voice was sleepy now. "Are you scared?" Jake considered the question carefully. "Sometimes," he admitted. "But being scared doesn't mean we let fear control us. It means we trust God even more. Like Mom did when she was sick, exactly like that." Jake kissed her forehead. "Get some sleep, sweetheart. I'll be right down the hall." Lily's eyes drifted closed, her breathing evening out. Jake remained kneeling beside her bed for a moment longer, watching his daughter's peaceful face. In the quiet of her room, he renewed his silent promise to protect her, to show her courage, to never let fear rule their lives. The old church basement smelled of coffee and fresh-baked cookies. Jake sat in a circle with other community leaders, his hands wrapped around a steaming mug. Pastor Williams stood at the front, his weathered face creased with concern as he addressed the group. "Our youth need guidance now more than ever," the pastor said, gesturing to a board covered with newspaper clippings about recent gang activity. "They need to know there's another way." Jake shifted in his metal folding chair, memories of Marcus's terrified face flashing through his mind. The boy had looked so young, so lost that night in the alley, just like many others in their neighborhood. Mrs. Chen, who ran the local grocery store, raised her hand. "But where can they go? The community center closes at 5, and that's when they need us most." Jake cleared his throat. All eyes turned to him. "My house," he said simply. "I've got space. I've got time after my day shift. And Lily." He smiled, thinking of his daughter's generous heart. She'd love the company. The room buzzed with surprised murmurs. Sarah, sitting next to him, squeezed his arm. "Jake, are you sure? With everything going on?" He nodded firmly. "Maybe that's exactly why we need to do this. Show these kids there's more to life than fear and violence." By that afternoon, Jake's living room had transformed. He'd pushed the coffee table against the wall to make space for extra chairs. The kitchen counter held stacks of paper plates and plastic cups. A pot of spaghetti bubbled on the stove, filling the house with the aroma of garlic and tomatoes. Lily bounced on her toes as she helped set up. "Can I share my colored pencils, Dad, for homework?" "That's thoughtful of you, sweetie." Jake ruffled her hair. "But let's keep your special ones in your room, okay?" The doorbell rang at 3:30. Jake opened it to find 3 nervous-looking middle school kids on his porch, accompanied by Mrs. Martinez from next door. "These are my grandson, Miguel, and his friends," she said. "They heard about the study group. Come on in." Jake smiled, stepping aside. "Hope you're hungry." More kids arrived in small groups. Some Jake recognized from the neighborhood, Others were new faces. They clustered awkwardly at first, but the smell of food and Lily's cheerful welcome soon had them relaxing. Jake served heaping plates of spaghetti while asking about their days. "How's that math test coming up, Miguel? Need any help with fractions?" "I hate fractions," Miguel admitted through a mouthful of pasta. "Wait till I tell you how we use them in the military." Jake grinned. "Ever wonder how to calculate the exact angle for a parachute landing?" The kids leaned in, food forgotten, as Jake demonstrated with paper napkins. Soon they were folding their own paper airplanes, learning about angles and wind resistance without realizing they were doing math. A quiet knock at the door made Jake look up. Marcus stood there, shoulders hunched, holding a worn backpack. "I heard you were helping with homework?" Jake's heart squeezed at the boy's uncertainty. "Perfect timing. We're just getting started on geometry." Marcus slipped inside, keeping close to the walls. Some kids whispered they knew who his brother was, but Lily, bless her heart, immediately waved him over. "Do you want to see my solar system project?" she asked, pulling out her carefully crafted model. "Dad helped me get the sizes right. Did you know Jupiter has 79 moons?" The tension in Marcus's shoulders eased slightly as he sat down next to her. "That's cool. We're studying planets in science class too." The afternoon flowed into evening. Kids spread their homework across the floor, asking questions between bites of garlic bread. Jake moved among them, helping with math problems, listening to reading assignments, sharing stories that made the lessons real. "When I was stationed in Iraq," he told them, "knowing how to read a map could save your life. Those coordinates weren't just numbers. They were the difference between finding your way home or getting lost in the desert." "Were you scared?" a small voice asked. Jake paused, choosing his words carefully. "Yes, but you know what? Being brave means doing what's right even when you're scared, and having faith that good will win in the end." He caught Marcus watching him intently, something shifting behind the boy's eyes. As the sun began to set, parents arrived to pick up their children. Each kid left with a full stomach, completed homework, and a standing invitation to return. Mrs. Martinez helped clean up while Jake packed leftover spaghetti into containers. "This is good, what you're doing," she said softly. "These children need hope." In the living room, Lily had convinced Marcus to stay for one more game. They sat cross-legged on the floor, moving pieces across a board. Marcus actually smiled when Lily sent one of his pieces back to start. Jake leaned against the doorframe, watching them. For a moment, he could almost forget about the danger, about Darnell's threats. This was what mattered, creating a safe space where kids could just be kids. His phone buzzed in his pocket. The unknown number made his stomach clench. Opening the message, he read the words that shattered the peaceful moment. "Stop meddling, or she's next." The next morning, Jake sat at Rosie's diner with his veteran friends, the threatening text message displayed on his phone in the center of the worn formica table. Steam rose from their coffee cups as they huddled close, speaking in low voices. Sarah Martinez, who'd served as a combat medic, frowned at the screen. "They're escalating, Jake. We need to tighten security." Mike Chen, a former Marine, nodded gravely. His weathered face showed the kind of focus Jake remembered from their deployment days. "I can adjust my hardware store hours. Take the morning shift to watch Lily's route to school. And I'll handle afternoons," Tom Wilson added, his gray hair neat despite the early hour. "My retirement can finally be useful for something besides fishing." Jake wrapped his hands around his coffee mug, drawing comfort from its warmth. "I appreciate you all, but I can't ask you to put your lives on hold." "You're not asking," Sarah said firmly. "We're telling. Remember what Sergeant Brooks used to say?" They all spoke in unison. "Leave no man behind." The diner's bell chimed as more veterans entered, right on schedule. Soon their usual booth overflowed with familiar faces, all ready to help create a protection schedule. Jake watched them plotting patrol routes on paper napkins, using military precision to guard his little girl. "We'll need radios," Mike said, sketching a rough map of the neighborhood. "My store's got a new shipment coming in." "I can cover the cost," Tom offered, but Jake shook his head. "We do this smart, not expensive. Regular phone calls, scheduled check-ins, just like old times." By the time they finished breakfast, they had a solid plan. 4 rotating shifts, coordinated surveillance points, and emergency protocols. It wasn't perfect, but it was something. Back at home, Jake's living room continued to fill with neighborhood kids each afternoon. Word had spread about the safe space, the homework help, and the veteran who actually made learning interesting. Today, a new face appeared. A teenage girl with tired eyes who introduced herself as Maria. "My brother's in Cruz's gang," she admitted quietly while working on her English essay. "But I don't want that life. I see what it does to him." Jake kept his voice gentle. "There's always another path, Maria." "Is there?" She glanced around nervously. "They say once you're in for life. Nothing's for life except what we choose to keep." Jake pulled up a chair. The strongest person isn't the one who can fight best. It's the one brave enough to stop fighting when there's a better way. More teens began opening up as the days passed. They shared stories of pressure to join gangs, of younger siblings they wanted to protect, of dreams they were afraid to voice. Jake listened, guided, and slowly saw hope replacing fear in their eyes. But Darnell wasn't staying quiet. 3 days after Maria's first visit, Jake woke to find his wooden fence transformed into a canvas of threats. Crude spray-painted messages stretched the entire length. "Dead man walking," and "watch your back." And worse things, he was glad Lily wouldn't understand. His daughter stood in her pajamas, staring through the kitchen window at the vandalism. "Why are they so mad at us, Dad?" Jake knelt beside her, heart aching at the tremor in her voice. "Sometimes people get stuck thinking anger is the only way to be strong. But you know what's really stronger?" "What?" "Love, kindness, the courage to help others, even when you're scared." Lily nodded, but her small hand gripped his tightly. "I'm still afraid." "That's okay, sweetheart. Being brave doesn't mean not being scared. It means doing what's right anyway." His veteran friends arrived within the hour, armed with paint and brushes. They worked together, covering the threats with clean white strokes. Some neighbors joined in, bringing coffee and donuts. By noon, the fence stood fresh and bright, a symbol of community refusing to be intimidated. But as evening approached, the weight of constant vigilance pressed heavily on Jake. He watched Lily picking at her dinner, her usual chatter subdued. When she asked to swing in the backyard, he couldn't refuse her attempt at normalcy. The wooden swing, built by Jake himself after they'd moved in, creaked softly as he pushed her. The setting sun painted the sky in deep oranges and purples, but shadows were already gathering at the edges of their yard. "Hiya, Dad," Lily called, and Jake obliged, though his eyes never stopped scanning their surroundings. "You know what Mom used to say about swinging?" he asked, catching glimpses of movement near the street that he hoped were just his friends on patrol. "That it's like flying?" "That's right. She said when you're swinging, you're as close to being free as a person can get." Lily pumped her legs harder. "I wish she was here." "Me too, baby." Jake steadied the swing, noticing more shadows shifting between houses. "But she'd be so proud of how brave you're being. Like you, braver than me." He caught the swing, bringing her in for a hug. "You know why? Because you still smile every day. You still share your colored pencils with new friends. You make people feel safe just by being you." Lily leaned back against him. "Does being brave mean the scary things will go away?" Jake watched another shadow move near their trash cans, recognizing Mike's distinctive gait with relief. "Not always. But being brave means we face the scary things together, and that makes them a little less scary, doesn't it?" She nodded, her hair tickling his chin. "Can we stay out a little longer?" "A few more minutes," Jake agreed, pushing her gently. He kept one hand on the swing rope and one eye on the deepening dusk, standing guard over his daughter's moment of peace. The summer sun hung low in the sky as Jake fired up 3 borrowed grills in his backyard. The smell of charcoal mixed with the sweet scent of Sarah Martinez's famous potato salad. Folding tables lined the fence, loaded with casseroles, fresh rolls, and enough desserts to feed an army. "Daddy, is anyone actually going to come?" Lily asked, arranging paper plates with careful precision. Her small hands smoothed each napkin like it was precious silk. Jake smiled, trying to hide his own uncertainty. "We'll see, sweetheart. Sometimes you just have to set the table and trust people will show up." His veteran friends had already arrived, naturally falling into security positions around the yard, while pretending to just enjoy the afternoon. Mike Chen happened to be manning the grill nearest the gate, while Tom Wilson casually positioned his lawn chair where he could watch the street. The first guests arrived tentatively, church members clutching covered dishes, their children peeking around their legs. Then came some of the teens from Jake's after-school group, shuffling in with uncertain smiles. Mrs. Rodriguez, whose son was in Darnell's gang, stood at the gate for a long moment before Jake walked over to welcome her personally. "There's plenty of food," he said softly, "and plenty of hope to go around." Her eyes welled with tears as she handed him a plate of homemade tamales. "My Jorge used to love these," she whispered. "Before." "Maybe he still does," Jake replied, guiding her to a seat where other mothers soon gathered. The yard slowly filled with people from all corners of the neighborhood. Veterans chatted with church ladies. Teenagers who usually eyed each other with suspicion found themselves sharing hamburgers and swapping stories about Jake's tutoring sessions. Marcus arrived as the sun was setting, his thin frame hesitating at the gate until Lily spotted him. "Marcus!" she called out, waving enthusiastically. "Come try the brownies I made." Jake watched as his daughter's innocent welcome drew the boy in. Marcus accepted a loaded plate and found a quiet spot near the fence, where Jake casually joined him a few minutes later. "Glad you made it," Jake said, keeping his voice light. Marcus pushed his food around the plate. "Darnell doesn't know I'm here," he admitted. "He'd be mad." "You're your own person, Marcus. You get to make your own choices." The teenager's shoulders hunched. "Do I? Sometimes it feels like I was born into this. Like I never had a choice at all." Jake let the silence stretch comfortably between them, watching as more neighbors arrived. The yard was getting crowded now, filled with laughter and conversation. "You know what I see when I look at you?" Jake finally asked. "I see a smart kid who's good at math, who helps younger kids with their homework, who makes my daughter laugh with terrible jokes. I see someone who could be anything he wants to be." Marcus's eyes grew wet. "Darnell, he's got everyone scared, even his own guys. It's like he's got this grip on everyone, and the tighter anyone tries to pull away, the harder he squeezes." "Fear's a powerful thing," Jake agreed. "But it's not the most powerful thing. What is? Hope, community, love." Jake gestured to the yard full of people. "Look around, Marcus. Every person here is choosing something different than fear." As if to prove his point, someone started strumming a guitar. A few church members began to sing, their voices lifting in familiar hymns. Others joined in, some just humming along, creating a melody that seemed to wrap around them all like a warm blanket. Mrs. Rodriguez found her way to Marcus, wrapping him in a tight hug that made him both squirm and lean in. "Your mama's been asking about you," she told him. "She misses you at Sunday dinners." The evening deepened into dusk, but no one seemed eager to leave. Children chased fireflies while their parents shared second helpings of dessert. Veterans traded war stories that somehow turned into fishing tales. Someone brought out more guitars, and the singing grew stronger. Jake stood back, watching it all with a full heart. This was what community looked like. Not perfect, not without its scars and fears, but willing to come together, to try. Lily appeared at his side, yawning. "Daddy, I'm tired. But can we do this again sometime?" "Of course, baby." He scooped her up, though she was getting almost too big for it. Her head rested heavily on his shoulder. As the crowd began to thin, people stopped to thank Jake, to squeeze his arm, to whisper words of encouragement. Marcus was one of the last to leave, pausing at the gate. "Mr. Turner," his voice was quiet but steady. "Thanks for everything, for that night, and for showing me there's another way." Jake nodded, understanding all that wasn't being said. "You're always welcome here, Marcus. Remember that." Inside, Jake carried a sleepy Lily upstairs to her room. She was already in her pajamas, having changed earlier when the mosquitoes came out. Her eyes were heavy as he tucked her into bed. "That was the best party ever," she murmured. "It sure was, sweetheart." Jake smoothed her hair back, remembering how her mother used to do the same thing. "Everyone was so happy," Lily continued, fighting sleep. "Even Marcus smiled. Real smiles, not pretend ones." "Yes, he did." Jake leaned down to kiss her forehead. "Sweet dreams, baby girl." "Sweet dreams, Daddy." The peaceful moment was shattered by the sudden roar of an engine outside. Tires squealed against pavement, the sound angry and threatening before fading into the night. The sharp rapping on Jake's front door cut through the pre-dawn silence. Jake bolted upright in his recliner, where he'd dozed off while reviewing bills. His military training kicked in instantly. Quiet, alert, ready. Through the peephole, he saw Marcus shifting from foot to foot, looking over his shoulder every few seconds. Jake opened the door carefully, scanning the street before ushering the teenager inside. "Mr. Turner," Marcus gasped, his voice trembling. "They're coming tonight. Darnell, he's planned everything. They're gonna hit your house around midnight." Jake guided Marcus to the kitchen table, noting how the boy's hands shook as he accepted a glass of water. The morning sun was just beginning to paint the sky pink through the window. "Tell me everything," Jake said, keeping his voice steady and calm. Marcus spoke in rushed whispers, detailing how he'd overheard Darnell planning with his lieutenants. "They think everyone will be sleeping. They're gonna surround the house, throw bricks through all the windows at once. Then," his voice cracked. Jake placed a reassuring hand on Marcus's shoulder. "You did the right thing coming here. Now, I need you to go somewhere safe. Your aunt's house, maybe?" Marcus nodded, relief flooding his face. As soon as the boy left through the back door, Jake sprang into action. He speed-dialed Mike Chen, his closest veteran friend. "Mike, we've got a situation. Call the others. Emergency meeting at my place in 30 minutes. While waiting, Jake checked on Lily, still peacefully asleep upstairs. He touched the small cross hanging around his neck, his late wife's last gift to him. "Watch over our baby girl," he whispered. By 7 a.m., Jake's living room was filled with determined faces. 8 veterans, including Sarah Martinez, who'd served as a combat medic in Iraq. Pastor Williams and 3 church elders sat on the couch, their usual morning prayers temporarily replaced by strategic planning. "They're expecting to find a sleeping house," Mike said, his tactical mind already working. "Instead, they'll find us wide awake and waiting." "Not with weapons," Pastor Williams interjected firmly. "We'll meet them with prayer and solidarity. Show them what real strength looks like." Jake nodded slowly. "Agreed. We're not here to fight. We're here to stand firm." They spent the day preparing. Church members quietly spread the word. Veterans took turns patrolling the neighborhood, noting suspicious vehicles. Some of the older ladies from church arrived with casseroles and thermoses of coffee, turning Jake's kitchen into a command center of caring souls. As night fell, Lily was safely tucked away at a friend's house, though it broke Jake's heart to see her go. His veteran friends positioned themselves strategically around the property, not hiding, but standing proudly in plain sight. The church members gathered on Jake's front porch, singing hymns softly in the darkness. Tom Wilson, a Vietnam vet in his 70s, stood at attention by the front gate, his silver hair gleaming under the streetlight. Sarah Martinez walked the perimeter, her combat boots making purposeful clicks on the sidewalk. Other veterans, some with canes, some with gray hair, all with unwavering determination, formed a protective circle around the property. At 11:45 p.m., they heard the first cars approaching. Jake's heart pounded, but his stance remained steady on his front porch, Pastor Williams at his side. The vehicles rolled to a stop, and dark figures emerged from the shadows. The gang members hesitated when they saw the scene before them. Instead of a dark, vulnerable house, they found themselves facing a wall of veterans standing shoulder to shoulder, heads bowed in prayer but backs straight with military bearing. The soft voices of church members lifted amazing grace into the night air. Darnell's voice cut through the darkness. "What is this?" "This is community," Jake called back calmly. "This is what it looks like when people stand together. No weapons, no threats, just faith and unity." The gang members shifted uncertainly. They'd come expecting to terrorize a single man and his daughter. Instead, they faced grandmothers holding candles, elderly veterans standing at attention, and church members whose voices grew stronger with each hymn. One of the younger gang members dropped his brick first. Others followed, the concrete chunks clattering to the asphalt like a shower of surrender. The night air hung thick with tension and possibility. "Y'all are crazy," someone muttered, but there was uncertainty in the voice. Pastor Williams stepped forward, his Bible held high. "No, son, we're family, and family protects its own." The standoff lasted another 10 minutes before the gang members began retreating to their cars. They pulled away slowly, their headlights cutting through the darkness like searching questions. As the last car disappeared around the corner, the tension broke. Several church ladies burst into tears of relief. Veterans clapped each other on the back, their grins bright in the darkness. Jake found Marcus hiding behind a nearby tree, watching everything. He approached the teenager, who looked both awed and terrified. "Thank you," Jake said simply, extending his hand. Marcus took it, his grip firm despite his trembling fingers. Their handshake was brief but meaningful, a moment of trust in a night full of uncertainty. As Marcus melted away into the shadows, Jake felt the weight of the evening settle on his shoulders. The show of solidarity had worked, for now. But looking at the scattered bricks on the street, the tired faces of his supporters, he knew deep in his bones that this was just one battle in a longer war. The real fight, the fight for his community's soul, was only beginning. The wooden pews of First Baptist Church creaked under the weight of dozens of worried neighbors. Evening light filtered through stained glass windows, casting rainbow shadows across bowed heads. Jake sat in the third row, his arm protectively around Lily, who clutched her favorite stuffed rabbit. Pastor Williams stood at the pulpit, his deep voice carrying through the sanctuary. "We gather tonight in solidarity, praying for peace in our streets and healing in our hearts." The congregation swayed gently to the hymns, their voices joining in a melody of hope. Jake noticed several of the teenagers from his tutoring group scattered among the pews, including Marcus, who kept glancing nervously at the door. Suddenly, the heavy church doors creaked open. A woman in her 50s entered, her shoulders straight despite obvious exhaustion etched on her face. Jake recognized her immediately from photos Marcus had shown him. Mrs. Cruz, Darnell's mother. She walked down the center aisle with dignified determination, though her hands trembled slightly. The singing faltered as people turned to watch. Pastor Williams paused mid-prayer, but gave her an encouraging nod. "I'm sorry to interrupt," Mrs. Cruz said, her voice carrying clearly through the hushed sanctuary. "But I had to come. I had to speak." She turned to face the congregation, tears glistening in her eyes. "My son, my Darnell, he's lost his way. But he wasn't always like this. He was a boy who loved to draw, who helped old Mrs. Johnson with her groceries, who protected his little brother Marcus from bullies." Marcus sank lower in his pew, but Jake saw the shine of tears on the teenager's cheeks. "I've watched him build walls of anger," Mrs. Cruz continued, her voice growing stronger. "Watched him turn pain into power, loneliness into control. But this vendetta, this bounty, it's destroying not just Mr. Turner's family, but our whole community. It's destroying my son's soul." The church door slammed open again. Darnell Cruz stood in the doorway, his face twisted with rage. "What are you doing here, Mama?" The congregation collectively held its breath. Jake instinctively pulled Lily closer, but didn't move from his seat. He watched as Darnell stormed down the aisle, his boots echoing against the wooden floor. "You got no right," Darnell spat, reaching for his mother's arm. "Coming here talking about me like—" "I have every right," Mrs. Cruz's voice cracked like thunder. "I'm your mother. I carried you under my heart for 9 months. I worked 3 jobs to keep food on our table after your father left. And I will not stand by while you tear apart everything I raised you to be." Darnell flinched as if struck. For a moment, the hardened gang leader disappeared, replaced by a little boy facing his mama's disappointment. Jake stood slowly, keeping Lily behind him. "Your mother's right, Darnell. This path you're on, it's not too late to change direction." Darnell's head snapped toward Jake, his eyes blazing. "You don't know nothing about my path. You come here, playing hero, turning my own brother against me." "No one turned against you," Jake said calmly. "Marcus loves you. Your mother loves you. But love means wanting better for the people we care about." "Don't talk to me about love." Darnell advanced toward Jake, his hands clenched into fists. "You think you're better than me? Think you can save everyone with your prayers and your perfect little family? My family isn't perfect." Jake's voice remained steady. "I lost my wife 3 years ago. Lily lost her mother. We know about pain, about anger, but we also know about forgiveness." Something flickered in Darnell's eyes. Recognition, perhaps, or uncertainty. Mrs. Cruz stepped closer to her son, gently touching his arm. "Baby, listen to him. Remember what I taught you about second chances?" The tension in the sanctuary was palpable, Pastor Williams moved quietly to stand near Jake and Lily, while Marcus crept closer to his brother. Darnell stood frozen, his chest heaving with emotion. Darnell's voice cracked. For the first time, Jake saw past the gang leader's armor to the wounded man beneath. I can't just— Yes, you can, his mother whispered. You're stronger than the anger, baby. You always have been. The congregation watched in stunned silence as Darnell's shoulders began to shake. Mrs. Cruz wrapped her arms around her son, and for a moment, just a moment, he leaned into her embrace, like a child seeking comfort. The peaceful tableau shattered as gunshots exploded outside the church. Glass rained down as bullets pierced the stained glass windows. Screams erupted throughout the sanctuary. Everybody down, Jake shouted, his military training taking over. He spun around, searching frantically for Lily. She stood frozen in terror near the pew. More shots rang out. Without hesitation, Jake lunged forward, wrapping his body around his daughter as chaos erupted in the church. He could feel her small frame trembling against him as bullets continued to tear through the evening air. The sharp crack of gunfire shattered the evening peace. Glass exploded inward as bullets punched through the church's stained glass windows, sending rainbow shards raining down on the congregation. Screams filled the sanctuary as people dove for cover. Everyone down! Jake's military training kicked in instantly. He grabbed Lily and pulled her beneath the heavy wooden pew, shielding her small body with his own. Her stuffed rabbit tumbled to the floor beside them. Daddy, I'm scared, Lily whimpered, pressing her face against his chest. I've got you, baby, Jake whispered, keeping his voice steady despite his racing heart. Keep your head down. Through the chaos, Jake's veteran friends sprang into action. Mike, a former Marine, helped an elderly couple crawl toward the side exit. Sarah, who'd served as a medic in Afghanistan, guided a group of teenagers toward the basement stairs. More bullets sprayed through the church. The rival gang members were shooting wildly from speeding cars, their engines roaring in the night. Hymn books exploded into clouds of paper. A chandelier crashed to the floor, crystal pieces skittering across wooden planks. This way, Pastor Williams shouted from behind the pulpit, waving people toward the back exit. Stay low. Jake scanned the scene, looking for a safe path to get Lily out. 20 feet to the side door. They'd have to cross open space to reach it. He spotted Mrs. Cruz huddled behind a column, Marcus trembling beside her. Darnell had disappeared in the chaos. When I say go, run to that door as fast as you can, Jake instructed Lily, pointing. Don't stop for anything. Sarah will be waiting. Lily nodded, her face pale but determined. Jake counted under his breath, timing the bursts of gunfire. Ready, go! They sprinted across the sanctuary. Jake kept Lily in front of him, his body positioned to shield her from any bullets. They were halfway there when he saw movement in his peripheral vision. A dark figure rushing toward them. Look out! Someone shouted. Jake spun, pushing Lily ahead while turning to face the threat. But it was Darnell, diving to tackle a gang member who had slipped in through a broken window. The two men crashed into a row of chairs as a gun clattered across the floor. Get her out! Darnell yelled at Jake, struggling with the attacker. Jake didn't hesitate. He scooped up Lily and ran for the door. They were almost there when he felt the impact, like being hit with a sledgehammer. Hot pain exploded through his left shoulder, spinning him sideways. But his grip on Lily never loosened. Dad! Lily screamed as they stumbled through the doorway into the cool night air. Jake's vision blurred, but he forced himself to stay upright. He could feel warm blood soaking through his shirt. Sarah appeared beside them, helping to steady him. I've got her, Sarah said firmly, reaching for Lily. Let me take her. No. Lily clung tighter to Jake's shirt. Daddy's hurt. Police sirens wailed in the distance, getting closer. The sound of squealing tires indicated the rival gang was retreating. Jake's knees buckled as the adrenaline began to fade. He sank to the ground, still holding Lily close. Pressure on that wound, Sarah ordered, pressing a cloth against Jake's shoulder. Red immediately bloomed through the fabric. Through the haze of pain, Jake was aware of more people spilling out of the church. He heard Mrs. Cruz calling for her sons. Then Darnell's voice, surprisingly close. Is Turner okay? Jake looked up to see the gang leader standing over them, his usual hard expression replaced by something that looked almost like concern. Their eyes met, and in that moment, something shifted between them. He saved my baby brother last week, Darnell said quietly, almost to himself. And now he. His voice trailed off as he stared at Jake's bleeding shoulder. The first ambulance arrived, its red and white lights painting the scene in harsh flashes. EMTs rushed forward with a stretcher. Jake felt himself being lifted, gentle hands trying to pry Lily away. "No, please," Lily sobbed, her fingers white, knuckled in Jake's shirt. "Don't leave me, Daddy. Let them help him, sweetheart," Sarah soothed, but Lily wouldn't let go. "It's okay," Jake managed through gritted teeth. Let her hold my hand." The EMTs exchanged glances, but nodded. They helped Lily climb into the ambulance alongside the stretcher, her small hand gripping Jake's larger one. As the siren started up again, Jake caught a final glimpse of Darnell through the closing doors. The gang leader stood motionless in the church parking lot, watching as the ambulance pulled away into the night. Lily's tears fell onto their clasped hands as the ambulance raced through the streets. Jake wanted to tell her everything would be all right, but the pain was overwhelming now. He focused on the warmth of her hand in his, the sound of her whispered prayers mixing with the wail of the sirens as darkness crept in at the edges of his vision. The steady beep of hospital monitors filled the sterile room as Jake lay still, his chest rising and falling with mechanical precision beneath white sheets. Bandages wrapped his shoulder where the bullet had torn through flesh and muscle. His face, usually warm and animated, remained expressionless under the harsh fluorescent lights. Lily sat curled in the oversized hospital chair beside his bed, her small fingers intertwined with her father's limp hand. Dark circles shadowed her eyes. She hadn't slept properly since the shooting 2 days ago. Her school backpack lay forgotten in the corner, homework untouched. "Baby, you need to eat something," Sarah, Jake's fellow veteran, urged gently. She set a paper bag with a sandwich on the side table. The smell of turkey and cheese filled the air, but Lily just shook her head. "I'm not leaving him," she whispered, her voice hoarse from crying. "What if he wakes up and I'm not here?" Sarah squeezed her shoulder, knowing better than to argue. The girl had already lost her mother. The fear of losing her father, too, was etched in every line of her young face. The door creaked open, and Mrs. Cruz stepped in quietly. Her weathered face carried the weight of countless sleepless nights, but her eyes held a fierce determination as she approached Jake's bed. Without a word, she pulled a wooden rosary from her pocket and began to pray in soft Spanish, her lips moving silently. Lily watched the older woman with curious eyes. Mrs. Cruz had been coming every few hours, as if drawn by an invisible force to Jake's bedside. Each time, she would pray, sometimes crying quietly, sometimes just holding her rosary and watching Jake breathe. Outside in the hallway, nurses whispered about the steady stream of visitors. Veterans in their old service caps came to stand guard. Church members brought casseroles and flowers until the room overflowed. Even strangers appeared, having read about Jake's courage in the local newspaper. The story had spread like wildfire across the city. How a single father had put himself between innocent children and flying bullets. How his quiet strength had begun to heal deep wounds in the community. The mayor had visited yesterday, cameras flashing as he promised to increase police presence in the neighborhood. But the real change was happening in the shadows, away from the media's glare. In the streets where Darnell's gang once ruled with iron fists, doubt had begun to creep in. Young members whispered in corners, questioning orders they'd once followed blindly. "Did you hear?" one nurse murmured to another as they checked Jake's vitals. 3 more gang kids turned themselves in this morning. Said they were done with the violence." Lily absorbed every word, every whispered conversation. She understood more than the adults realized. She knew her daddy hadn't just taken a bullet, he'd cracked something open in the heart of their city. Mrs. Cruz finished her prayers and approached Lily slowly. From her large purse, she pulled out a container of still warm arroz con pollo. "You are your father's daughter," she said softly, her accent thick with emotion. "Strong like him, but even the strong must eat." The familiar smell of home-cooked food made Lily's stomach growl despite herself. Mrs. Cruz pulled up a chair and opened the container, the steam carrying memories of family dinners in better days. "My Darnell," Mrs. Cruz said quietly as she watched Lily take small bites. "He was like you once. Sweet boy who loved his mama's cooking. Something broke in him when his father left. But your papa, he shows another way, shows what a real man is. tears slipped down her cheeks as she spoke. I pray every day now, not just for your father to heal, but for my son's heart to soften. Outside the hospital windows, the city continued its daily rhythm. But in the gang territories, change was rippling outward. Darnell hadn't been seen since the shooting, but his absence spoke volumes. His most loyal lieutenants found themselves questioning everything they'd built their lives around. Marcus, Darnell's younger brother, had been caught between two worlds since Jake saved him that night. Now he stood in front of the hospital every day, keeping vigil in his own way, torn between family loyalty and an awakening conscience. The afternoon sun began to fade, casting long shadows across Jake's still form. Lily's eyes grew heavy as she listened to the steady beep of monitors. Mrs. Cruz draped her shawl over the girl's shoulders and began humming an old lullaby. For the first time in days, exhaustion finally overcame Lily's determination to stay awake. She curled deeper into the chair, her small hands finding her father's dog tags that hung around her neck. The metal was warm against her skin as she clutched them tightly. "To Bendigo, Pequeña," Mrs. Cruz whispered as Lily's eyes fluttered closed. The girl finally drifted into sleep, still holding the dog tags like a lifeline, while her father's gentle breathing filled the quiet room. Jake's eyelids fluttered, heavy as lead. The sharp smell of antiseptic stung his nostrils as consciousness slowly returned. His throat felt like sandpaper, and a dull throb pulsed through his shoulder. The steady beeping of monitors filled his ears as the white hospital ceiling came into focus. "Lily?" His voice cracked, barely a whisper. "Where's Lily, Daddy?" A small, warm hand squeezed his, and Jake turned his head to see his daughter's tear-streaked face. She looked exhausted, her usually neat braids messy, wearing the same Superman t-shirt from days ago. "Are you okay, sweetheart?" Jake tried to reach for her, but winced as pain shot through his shoulder. "I'm fine, Daddy, don't move." Lily pressed the nurse call button. "You're the one who got hurt." Relief flooded Jake's face as he studied his daughter, checking for any signs of injury. "You're sure you're not hurt? Promise me?" "Promise." Lily managed a wobbly smile. "The veterans protected me, just like you said they would. They've been taking turns watching over us." A nurse bustled in, checking Jake's vitals and adjusting his medication. "Welcome back, Mr. Turner. You gave everyone quite a scare." Across town, in a dimly lit apartment, Darnell Cruz paced restlessly. The walls seemed to close in as his phone buzzed constantly with messages from gang members. Some demanded retaliation for the rival gang's attack, while others expressed doubts about continuing the violence. "We gotta hit back hard," insisted Tony, one of his lieutenants. "Can't let them think we're weak." But Marcus, Darnell's younger brother, stood in the corner, arms crossed. "That man took a bullet protecting kids, protecting me, and we're still talking about more violence?" "Watch your mouth, little man," Tony growled, but Darnell raised his hand for silence. "Leave us," he ordered. The room cleared except for Marcus. Darnell slumped onto his worn leather couch, rubbing his temples. The image of Jake Turner throwing himself in front of those bullets played on repeat in his mind. It didn't fit with everything he thought he knew about how the world worked. "That soldier," Darnell muttered. "He could have just saved himself. Why didn't he run?" Marcus sat beside his brother. "Because that's not who he is. You should see how he treats us at his house, like we're worth something, even after everything." Darnell stood abruptly, grabbing his car keys. "I need to think." The streets were quiet as Darnell's black Charger cruised past shuttered storefronts. His territory felt different now, tense, uncertain. Some of his most loyal soldiers had stopped answering calls. Others had been spotted at the church, of all places. He drove past Jake's house, where veterans still stood guard. They watched his car pass with steady eyes, neither threatening nor afraid, just waiting. The hospital loomed ahead, its windows glowing like countless eyes in the night. Darnell pulled into the parking lot, killing the engine. From here he could see the floor where Jake recovered, the same floor where his mother spent hours praying. His phone buzzed again. More messages about retaliation, about respect, about power. But the words felt hollow now, like echoes from a life that suddenly made less sense. "What kind of man," Darnell whispered to himself, "puts a bounty on someone who saved his brother?" He thought of his mother's tears, of Marcus's changed eyes, of his soldiers questioning everything they'd built. The empire of fear he'd created was crumbling, not from violence or rivalry, but from one man's simple act of courage. Darnell's hands gripped the steering wheel until his knuckles turned white. Pride warred with shame in his chest. The reputation he'd built, the fear he'd cultivated, it had been his armor, his identity. But now that armor felt like a prison. "What am I doing?" he whispered, staring at the hospital lights. The words hung in the still air of his car, a question that demanded an answer he wasn't sure he was ready to give. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the park as hundreds gathered for the prayer rally. Church members had set up folding chairs and a small stage, complete with speakers and microphones. Handmade signs reading "Pray for Jake" and "Community United" dotted the crowd. Jake sat in a wheelchair near the front, his arm in a sling. Lily perched on his good knee, her small hand never leaving his. Veterans flanked them protectively, their weathered faces scanning the growing crowd. Pastor Williams stepped up to the microphone, his deep voice carrying across the park. "We're here today to show that love is stronger than hatred, that faith is more powerful than fear." A sudden hush fell over the crowd. People turned, some gasping, others grabbing their children. A line of cars had pulled up at the park's edge, their engines rumbling. Darnell Cruz stepped out first, followed by 24 gang members in their signature colors. Jake felt Lily tense on his lap. He squeezed her hand gently, watching as Darnell made his way through the parting crowd. The gang leader's usual swagger was gone, replaced by something Jake had never seen before: uncertainty. The veterans shifted closer to Jake, but he raised his good hand, signaling them to wait. Something was different about Darnell's approach. His hands were visible, empty of weapons. His face showed none of the familiar anger. Pastor Williams gripped the microphone stand. "Brother Cruz, this is a peaceful gathering." "I know," Darnell said, his voice carrying clearly. "That's why I'm here." He gestured toward the microphone. "May I?" The pastor hesitated, looking at Jake. After a moment, Jake nodded slowly. As Darnell climbed the simple wooden stage, Marcus emerged from the crowd, moving closer to watch his brother. The teenager's eyes were wide with hope and fear. Darnell stood before the microphone, his hands gripping its sides. The usual hardness in his face had cracked, revealing something raw underneath. He cleared his throat, looking directly at Jake and Lily. "I've spent my whole life building walls," Darnell began, his voice unsteady. "Walls of fear, walls of anger. I thought that's what made me strong." He paused, swallowing hard. "But this past week I've seen real strength. Not in violence or threats, but in a man who risked everything to save my brother." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Some gang members shifted uncomfortably, while others stood straighter, watching their leader intently. "Mr. Turner," Darnell continued, his voice catching. "Jake, you didn't just save Marcus that night. You showed us all a different way." He turned to address the whole gathering. "I've done things I can't take back. I've hurt people, threatened a child." His eyes fell on Lily, who was watching him with those innocent eyes that had haunted his dreams. "I put a bounty on a hero's head because my pride couldn't handle being wrong." Tears began flowing down Darnell's mother's face as she watched from the third row. She pressed her hands together in prayer, lips moving silently. "The bounty is lifted," Darnell announced firmly. "But that's not enough. I'm standing here today to apologize. To Jake Turner, to his daughter Lily, to my brother Marcus, and to this entire community." His voice grew stronger with each word. "I'm sorry for the fear I've caused. I'm sorry for the hatred I've spread. I'm sorry for believing that terror was better than trust." Jake wheeled himself forward slightly, Lily still on his lap. His face showed no anger, only a quiet understanding that made Darnell's next words even harder to say. "When you took that bullet," Darnell's voice cracked again, "protecting kids who weren't even yours, protecting my own brother even after everything I'd done to you, it broke something in me, something that needed breaking." Marcus stepped closer to the stage, tears streaming down his face. Darnell saw him and extended his hand. "Come here, little brother," he said softly into the microphone. Marcus climbed the steps, and Darnell pulled him into a fierce embrace. The crowd gasped, then broke into applause and cheers. Several gang members wiped their eyes, no longer trying to hide their emotions. "I love you, man," Darnell whispered to Marcus, though the microphone caught his words. "I'm so sorry for the path I put you on." The brothers held each other, Years of pain and fear melting away in that public embrace. Their mother rushed forward, wrapping her arms around both her sons as the crowd's cheers grew louder. Darnell turned back to the microphone one last time, his arm still around Marcus. "The gang is finished," he declared. "No more territory, no more violence, no more fear. It ends today." The park erupted in celebration. People hugged each other, many crying openly. Gang members removed their colors, some throwing them into a pile, others simply letting them fall to the ground. Through it all, Jake watched with quiet satisfaction, holding Lily close. She looked up at him with shining eyes. "See, Daddy?" she whispered. "God answered our prayers." The sun was setting now, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks. As Darnell stepped down from the stage, he walked straight to Jake's wheelchair. Without hesitation, he knelt down to be at eye level with both Jake and Lily. "Can you ever forgive me?" he asked softly. Jake reached out with his good hand and gripped Darnell's shoulder. No words were needed. The simple gesture said everything. The abandoned warehouse loomed in the darkness, its broken windows reflecting the dim streetlights like jagged teeth. Inside, the air hung heavy with tension. 50 gang members shifted restlessly on wooden crates and rusty metal barrels, their faces cast in shadows from the few working lights overhead. Darnell Cruz stood before them, his shoulders straight, but his usual commanding presence somehow different. The warehouse's vast emptiness made every shuffling foot and whispered word echo. Some members exchanged confused glances. This wasn't their usual meeting spot, and the urgent summons had come without explanation. "Why we here, Cruz?" someone called out from the back. "This about Turner?" Darnell paced slowly, his boots crunching on scattered debris. "Yeah, it's about Turner. About all of us." He stopped, turning to face his crew. "I've been thinking hard these past days. Watching. Learning." "Learning what?" A tall member named Rico stepped forward, arms crossed. "Man's been causing us nothing but trouble." "No." Darnell's voice cut sharp through the musty air. "We've been causing the trouble, all of us." "For years." He looked around at the faces he'd known since childhood, some hardened by years on the streets, others barely old enough to drive. "I saw something at that prayer rally, something real." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Some nodded, having been there. Others scowled, suspicious of where this was heading. "Turner took a bullet protecting his kid," Darnell continued. "A bullet meant for us, from our rivals. Man had every reason to hate us, to run, to fight back. Instead, he opened his home, fed our kids, helped them with homework." His voice grew stronger. "When's the last time any of us did something like that for our community?" "So what?" someone shouted. "We supposed to become saints now?" Darnell shook his head. "No, but we're done being demons." He planted his feet firmly, raising his voice to fill the warehouse. "As of tonight, this gang is dissolved." The silence lasted exactly 2 seconds before chaos erupted. Shouts of protest bounced off the metal walls. Some members jumped to their feet, faces twisted in anger. Others sat frozen in shock. "You can't do that!" Rico pushed forward, fists clenched. "We built this together. This is our family." "Family?" Darnell's laugh was bitter. "Real family builds you up. Real family doesn't put bounties on good men or threaten little girls." He met Rico's glare steadily. "Look around you, man. Really look. Half these kids joined because they were scared of us, not because they wanted to." Several younger members shifted uncomfortably, eyes downcast. An older member named Trey stepped up beside Darnell. "He's right. I'm tired of looking over my shoulder. Tired of wondering which of our brothers gonna end up dead next." "It's weak," someone shouted. "You gone soft, Cruz?" "Nah." Darnell's voice softened. "For the first time in my life, I'm being strong, the right way." He pointed toward the door. "Anyone wants to keep living this life. There's the door. No revenge. No payback. Just go." Rico spat on the ground. "This is bull." He turned to the crowd. "Who's with me? Who wants to keep what we built?" About a dozen members moved to stand with Rico. They glared at Darnell, muttering threats under their breath as they headed for the door. Their footsteps echoed through the warehouse until the heavy metal door slammed behind them. The remaining members looked at each other uncertainly. One young kid raised his hand like he was in school. "What? What are we supposed to do now?" Darnell's expression softened. "Live. Really live. Turner's veteran friends are offering trade school scholarships. Church has got job training programs. Your choice. But for once, you got real choices. I don't know how to do nothing else, someone admitted quietly. Neither did I, Trey spoke up. But my cousin's got a construction company. Says he'll take on apprentices, no questions asked about our past. More voices joined in. One member had an uncle who owned a garage. Another knew about a community college program. Years of carefully constructed barriers began crumbling as hope, tentative but real, crept into their voices. Darnell watched as small groups formed, members talking seriously about possibilities they'd never considered before. Some still looked lost, but they weren't angry anymore. Just uncertain, like kids taking their first steps. One by one, they began to leave. Not in anger like Rico's group, but quietly, thoughtfully. Some stopped to shake Darnell's hand or give him brief hugs. Others simply nodded, words unnecessary between men who'd grown up together on these streets. Trey was one of the last to go. He paused at the door, looking back at the empty warehouse. Never thought I'd see this day. Me neither, Darnell admitted. You really think we can change? Just like that? Not just like that. It'll be hard. Darnell stepped up beside him, looking out into the night. But we're already stronger than we knew. Turner showed us that. Trey nodded slowly. Yeah, he did. He pushed open the door, stepping out into the cool night air. See you around, Cruz. The right way this time. The warehouse slowly emptied, footsteps fading into the night. Some walked alone, some in pairs or small groups, but all of them walked differently. Straighter, lighter, as if heavy chains had finally been lifted from their shoulders. The early morning sun cast long shadows across Jake Turner's front yard as his veteran friends helped him up the walkway. His arm rested in a sling, and each step was measured and careful, but determination burned in his eyes. Lily bounced ahead, her pigtails swinging as she pointed excitedly at their house. Look, Daddy. Everyone made signs. The modest brick home had been transformed. Colorful banners stretched across the porch railing, reading, Welcome home, Jake, and Our Hero. Handmade cards from neighborhood kids decorated the front door, their childish drawings bringing warmth to the morning air. Balloons in red, white, and blue danced in the breeze. Mrs. Rodriguez, their elderly neighbor, stood on her porch, wiping tears with her apron. Other neighbors emerged from their homes, gathering on the sidewalk. Someone started clapping, and soon the whole street joined in. Easy now, brother, said Mike, one of Jake's veteran friends, helping him up the porch steps. No rush. Jake paused at the top, overwhelmed by the welcome. Lily slipped her small hand into his good one, squeezing gently. The gesture steadied him, just as it had during his hospital stay. Inside, the house smelled of fresh paint and pine cleaner. During his recovery, the community had rallied together to repair the damage from that violent night. New windows gleamed, replacing the ones shattered by bullets. The walls bore fresh coats of paint, covering the marks of conflict. The church ladies stocked your fridge, Mike explained, helping Jake to his favorite armchair. And we've got a schedule worked out. Someone will be bringing dinner every night this week. Jake sank into the cushions, fighting back emotion. You all didn't have to. Yes, we did. Mike cut him off with a gentle smile. That's what family does. Throughout that first day home, a steady stream of visitors came by. Former gang members, now dressed in clean clothes with clear eyes, stopped to shake Jake's hand. They spoke of changes, enrolling in GED classes, applying for jobs, reconnecting with estranged parents. Marcus, the young man Jake had saved that fateful night, arrived with a group of teenagers. They carried textbooks and notebooks, settling around the living room like it was the most natural thing in the world. We kept the study group going while you were gone, Mr. Turner, Marcus explained, his voice proud. Just like you showed us. Jake watched as Lily moved among them, helping younger kids with math problems. She'd grown in the weeks he'd been hospitalized, not in height, but in spirit. The fear that had once shadowed her eyes was gone, replaced by quiet confidence. By afternoon, Jake's veteran friends had transformed the garage into a makeshift career center. They set up computers donated by local businesses and pinned job listings to a bulletin board. Mike, who owned a construction company, announced an apprenticeship program for former gang members willing to learn a trade. We're calling it Operation New Start, he told Jake, spreading out plans on the kitchen table. The VA's involved now, and 3 other companies have signed on to offer training. Jake nodded, throat tight with gratitude. This is bigger than I ever imagined. You sparked something, Jake. Showed people what's possible when you choose faith over fear. As evening approached, the visitors thinned out. Jake moved to the front porch, easing into the old wooden rocker. Lily perched on the step below him, her head resting against his knee. The street before them had changed from when they'd left for the hospital weeks ago. Children played hopscotch on the sidewalk, their laughter carrying on the warm air. Teenagers shot hoops at a portable basketball goal someone had set up, taking turns and cheering each other on. Parents sat on front steps, chatting across yards without the tension that had once gripped the neighborhood. A group of young boys rode past on bikes, waving at Jake. He recognized them as former gang members' younger brothers, kids who'd once been destined to follow their siblings into violence. Now they were just children again, free to be young. Daddy? Lily's voice was soft, thoughtful. Yes, sweetheart? Remember when you said courage is stronger than fear? Jake stroked her hair, remembering those dark nights when they'd huddled together, listening to danger prowl their streets. I do. You were right. She smiled up at him, her face glowing in the evening light. Look, everyone's not scared anymore. Jake followed her gaze. Across the street, Mrs. Rodriguez was teaching young girls to jump rope. Next door, Marcus helped his younger brother with homework on their front step. Down the block, Mike's construction crew was finishing up repairs on another house, former gang members working alongside veterans with focused pride. The street had become what Jake had always hoped it could be. Not just a collection of houses, but a true community. The transformation wasn't just in the fresh paint and repaired windows, but in the spirits of the people who called it home. Lily leaned back against his leg, humming softly. The porch swing creaked gently in the breeze, and somewhere a mother called her children in for dinner. Jake closed his eyes, letting the peaceful sounds wash over him. For the first time in years, the neighborhood breathed easy, its heart beating with hope instead of fear. The sun dipped lower, painting the sky in soft oranges and pinks. Children continued playing in the street, their parents watching without worry. The scene before Jake was simple but profound. Just kids being kids, free from the shadow of violence that had once darkened their lives. The afternoon sun streamed through Jake's living room windows, casting warm rectangles of light across the coffee table where Marcus sat, surrounded by textbooks and papers. His face glowed with pride as he slid a math test toward Jake. Look at this, Mr. Turner, Marcus said, pointing to the red mark at the top. Got a B+ on my algebra test. First B I've ever gotten in math. Jake leaned forward in his armchair, his injured shoulder still tender but healing well. He picked up the test paper, scanning the solved equations with genuine interest. This is excellent work, Marcus. You've really been putting in the hours, haven't you? Marcus ducked his head, but couldn't hide his smile. Yeah, been studying every night. Even helped some other guys with their homework. Remember Tommy from down the block? He was failing too. But now we study together. Jake set the test down and studied the young man before him. Gone was the frightened teenager he'd pulled from that dark alley weeks ago. In his place sat someone with purpose, shoulders straight, eyes clear and focused. You know what impresses me most? Jake asked, adjusting his sling carefully. It's not just the grade. It's your dedication to helping others succeed too. That's real leadership, Marcus. The boy's eyes widened slightly at the word leadership. It was the same quality his brother Darnell had always talked about, but this felt different, cleaner somehow, more honest. The thing about math, Jake continued, reaching for one of Marcus's textbooks, is that it's like building something. You need a solid foundation before you can move up. Just like in life, each good choice builds on the last one. Marcus nodded slowly, absorbing the words. My teacher says I might be able to take advanced classes next semester if I keep this up. He hesitated, then added softly, Never thought I'd be talking about advanced anything. Jake smiled warmly. Well, I did. I saw it in you that first night, Marcus. Sometimes we just need someone to believe in us before we can believe in ourselves. Their conversation was interrupted by sounds from outside, hammering and good-natured shouting. Through the window, they could see a group of former gang members working alongside church volunteers, repairing the community center's roof. The sight still amazed Jake. Men who weeks ago had been enemies now working side by side, sweat-stained and laughing. Your brother was there this morning, Marcus mentioned casually, though his voice held a note of wonder. At church, I mean. Sat in the back row. Jake nodded. He'd noticed Darnell too, had seen him slip in just as the service started and leave before it ended. It was the third Sunday in a row he'd come, each time staying a little longer. He's different now, Marcus continued, organizing his papers. Quieter. Thinks more before he speaks. Yesterday he helped Mom clean out the garage, just the two of them talking for hours. Jake watched as Marcus packed his books carefully into his backpack. Another new habit. The boy who used to crumple everything into balls now treated his possessions with respect. Change takes courage, Jake said softly. Sometimes more courage than fighting does. A knock at the door interrupted them. It was Mike, Jake's veteran friend, with news about the job training program. 6 more former gang members had signed up for construction apprenticeships, and a local mechanic was offering positions too. As Mike and Jake discussed logistics, Marcus finished packing up. Before leaving, he paused in the doorway. Mr. Turner, thanks. Not just for today, but for, everything. Jake nodded, understanding all that remained unspoken. Marcus hurried down the porch steps, waving to Lily, who was teaching double Dutch to younger kids in the yard. Later that afternoon, Jake made his way to the church. His shoulder ached less now, allowing him to drive short distances. The parking lot was full of cars and pickup trucks, volunteers working on various community projects. Inside, he found former gang members painting the Sunday school rooms, their careful brushstrokes covering old graffiti with bright, cheerful colors. Others were organizing donations for the food bank or helping elderly church members with building maintenance. And there, in the last pew, sat Darnell Cruz. He wasn't working yet, wasn't joining in the conversations around him, but he was there, watching, listening. His usual hardness had softened somewhat, though tension still lined his face. Jake made his way down the aisle, nodding to people as he passed. He could feel Darnell tracking his movement, but he didn't rush. When he reached the last pew, he simply stood there, waiting. After a moment, Darnell stood too. The two men faced each other, neither speaking at first. The sounds of work and chatter continued around them, but in this space between them, time seemed to slow. Finally, Jake extended his hand, his right one, still tender from the shooting but strong enough for this. Darnell looked at it for a long moment, then reached out and clasped it firmly. No words were needed. In that handshake was acknowledgement of the past and hope for the future. Recognition of change and the cost of transformation. Understanding between two men who had stood on opposite sides of a divide and now found themselves building bridges instead of walls. When they released hands, something had shifted. Darnell's shoulders relaxed slightly, and Jake saw a glimmer of peace in the former gang leader's eyes. Around them, the work continued, hammers tapping, brushes swooshing, voices calling back and forth, the sounds of healing, of community being rebuilt one day at a time. The spring morning dawned crisp and bright as people gathered in front of the church for the first annual Peace Walk. Jake Turner stood at the registration table, watching the growing crowd with quiet amazement. Just 6 months ago, these same streets had been battlegrounds. Now, they were filling with families, children, and hope. Lily bounced on her toes beside him, wearing a white t-shirt decorated with painted handprints from the neighborhood kids.
Look, Daddy! Marcus brought his whole family!
She pointed toward the parking lot where Marcus was helping his grandmother from their car. Jake smiled, noting how Marcus had traded his old gang colors for a clean, button-down shirt. The boy, young man now, caught Jake's eye and waved before carefully guiding his grandmother toward the gathering. The veteran friends arrived in force, wearing their service caps and carrying water bottles for the walkers. They moved through the crowd with purpose, helping organize the start line and checking on security measures more out of habit than necessity these days. 312 registered so far, Mrs. Chen announced from behind the table, her weathered hands busy with registration forms. Her convenience store, once shuttered with steel bars, now displayed cheerful window decorations made by neighborhood children. More than we dreamed possible. Jake nodded, emotion tightening his throat. He remembered those dark days when she'd been too afraid to stay open past sunset. Now her store had become a community hub, hosting afternoon study groups and serving as a safe space for teens needing somewhere to go. The walk's route would take them through streets that told their own story of transformation. Where gang tags had once marked territory, vibrant murals now bloomed, Scenes of children playing, doves in flight, and hands clasped in unity. Local artists had worked alongside former gang members to create these symbols of change. "Time to line up, everyone," Pastor Roberts called through a megaphone. "Remember, this isn't a race, it's a celebration." Jake felt a tug on his sleeve. Lily looked up at him with serious eyes. "Can we walk with Marcus and his grandma?" "Of course, sweetheart." They made their way through the crowd, greeting neighbors who months ago would have hurried past with averted eyes. Now there were warm smiles, children calling out to Lily, and the comfortable chatter of a community at peace. Marcus's grandmother beamed at their approach. "Jake Turner," she said, reaching for his hand. "My Marcus tells me everything you've done for him. Everything you've done for all our children." Jake squeezed her hand gently. "Marcus did the hard work himself. He just needed someone to believe in him." As they began walking, Jake noticed how the neighborhood had come alive. The corner grocery that had been boarded up for years was open again, its produce display spilling onto the sidewalk in colorful abundance. The old basketball court, once a notorious drug corner, now rang with the sound of children's laughter and bouncing balls. They passed the alley where he'd first found Marcus. Someone had planted flowers there now, bright marigolds pushing up through soil that had once seen violence. Marcus paused briefly, looking down the alley before squaring his shoulders and walking on. "Different place now, isn't it?" Jake said quietly. Marcus nodded. "Sometimes I can hardly believe it. Tommy's little brother actually plays out there now. And my grandma, she's not afraid to sit on her porch anymore." The procession wound through the streets, growing larger as more people joined along the way. Store owners stepped out to offer water and encouragement. Even Mrs. Rodriguez, who'd lost her son to gang violence years ago, stood in her doorway waving, her eyes bright with tears of hope. At the halfway point, Jake noticed several former gang members among the walkers. They moved differently now, heads high, looking people in the eye. Some had enrolled in trade schools, others worked construction, or helped with the community center's youth programs. Their transformation was as remarkable as the neighborhood's physical changes. Lily skipped ahead with some friends, her ponytail bouncing in the sunlight. Jake watched her, remembering those terrifying days when he'd feared letting her out of his sight. Now she moved through the neighborhood with the easy confidence of a child who felt safe and loved. The veterans walked in loose formation, their presence more ceremonial than protective now. They traded vigilance for victory, their war stories giving way to tales of neighborhood renewal. One of them, old Sergeant Mills, had even opened a workshop teaching kids basic carpentry. As they approached the final stretch back to the church, Jake noticed how many businesses had reopened. The old cinema was being renovated, its marquee promising family movies soon. The cafe on the corner served coffee to a mixed crowd of students and seniors. Even the vacant lots had been transformed into community gardens, their raised beds bursting with vegetables and flowers. The church bells began to toll as the walkers rounded the last corner. Jake's steps slowed as he took in the scene. Hundreds of people, all colors and ages, walking together in peace. The morning sun caught the church's stained glass windows, throwing rainbow patterns across the gathered crowd. They filed into the church parking lot where tables had been set up with refreshments. Children ran laughing between adults' legs, and the air filled with the buzz of conversation and shared joy. Jake watched as Marcus helped his grandmother to a chair, bringing her lemonade before joining some friends his age. Lily appeared at Jake's side, slipping her small hand into his. Her face was flushed from walking, but her eyes sparkled with something deeper than just physical exertion. She looked up at her father, squeezing his hand tight. "Daddy," she whispered, "you're our hero." Jake felt tears well up in his eyes as he looked down at his daughter. All the pain, fear, and uncertainty of the past months washed away in that moment, replaced by something profound and healing. He couldn't speak, but he pulled Lily close, holding her tight, as the sounds of their renewed community surrounded them in a symphony of hope. The evening air settled softly over the neighborhood as Jake Turner guided a sleepy Lily up their front steps. The charity walk had been a resounding success, with hundreds joining their march for peace through once dangerous streets. Now, as twilight painted the sky in gentle purples and blues, Jake's daughter could barely keep her eyes open. "Come on, sweetheart," Jake said softly, his hand steady on her shoulder. "Time for bed." In her room, Lily changed into her favorite pajamas. the ones covered in stars that her mother had picked out years ago. Jake watched from the doorway as she climbed into bed, her movements heavy with the pleasant exhaustion that comes from a day well spent. "Daddy?" Lily murmured as he pulled her covers up. Today was perfect. Jake's heart swelled as he sat on the edge of her bed. The moonlight streaming through her window cast a gentle glow across her face, so much like her mother's. He brushed a strand of hair from her forehead, remembering all the nights he'd sat here, worrying about their safety, wondering if they should run away. "It really was perfect, wasn't it?" he whispered, leaning down to kiss her forehead. Lily's eyes were already closing, but a small smile played on her lips. "I'm not scared anymore," she mumbled, drifting off. "The bad guys. They're not bad anymore." Jake sat there for a moment, watching his daughter's peaceful breathing. For the first time in months, there was no tension in her small frame, no hint of the fear that had haunted her sleep. She looked like any other 10-year-old girl, safe and secure in her bed, dreaming sweet dreams. Rising quietly, Jake moved to her window. He adjusted the curtain just so, an old habit from when he needed to check for suspicious movements in the shadows. But tonight, the street below was calm. A couple walked their dog, waving up at him. Children's bicycles lay scattered on front lawns, testament to a neighborhood where parents no longer feared letting their kids play outside. Jake switched on Lily's small nightlight, a habit she wasn't quite ready to give up, and softly closed her door. Instead of heading to his own room, he found himself drawn to the front porch, needing a moment to process the day's events. The wooden porch steps creaked familiarly as he settled down. The city sprawled before him, its skyline glittering against the darkening sky. From here, he could see the steeple of the church where everything had changed, where Darnell had finally chosen peace over violence. The same church where Marcus now led youth group meetings instead of running with gangs. Jake's hand unconsciously went to his shoulder, where the bullet scar served as a permanent reminder of that pivotal night. The pain had long since faded, but the memory remained sharp. The chaos, the screams, Lily's terrified face. Yet even that dark moment had sparked something powerful, a transformation that rippled through the community like a stone cast in still waters. He closed his eyes, remembering his wife. Sarah would have loved seeing their neighborhood like this. She'd always believed in the power of community, even when others had given up hope. "Sometimes the hardest battles," she used to say, "are won with love instead of fists." The evening breeze carried the scent of Mrs. Rodriguez's jasmine from next door, the same plants that gang members had once trampled. Now they bloomed freely, their sweet fragrance a symbol of renewal. Jake could hear distant laughter from the Thompsons' backyard, where teenagers gathered for supervised weekend cookouts instead of secret gang meetings. His fingers found his dog tags, cool metal against his palm. These tags had seen him through war zones in Iraq, but somehow the battle for his own neighborhood had demanded even more courage. Not the courage to fight, but the courage to stand firm in faith, to believe in redemption when everything seemed lost. The stars emerged one by one above him, bright and clear. Jake held his dog tags tighter, bowing his head in quiet prayer. He thanked God for protection, for transformation, for the miracle of changed hearts. He gave thanks for his daughter sleeping peacefully upstairs, for Marcus finding his way, for Darnell choosing a different path. Looking up at the star-filled sky, Jake smiled. The same stars that had witnessed their darkest nights now shone down on a community reborn. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but also new possibilities. Tomorrow held hope. A gentle peace settled over him as he sat there, matching the tranquility of the street before him. The night was quiet, not the tense quiet of fear, but the soft quiet of safety, of home. What would you do if you were in their place? Comment your answer below, and let's see how you'd rewrite the ending. If you enjoyed the story of Jake Turner, I handpicked the next story that you will enjoy. Please don't miss this one. Click here to watch it.